Rutger Bregman, how surprised were you by the huge reaction to your comments at Davos?
Oh, I was totally surprised. I went home actually on Friday, the last day of the forum. I went back to Amsterdam and I didn't expect much of it. After I had given my short speech, the response in the room, from the audience was quite aggressive. And no one really came up to me to say, hey, that was a good speech. So, I went home with a bit of a bad feeling, to be honest. It was only a couple of days later that it completely exploded.
You said the reaction in the room was aggressive. Beyond that room, more broadly, among the people there at Davos, did it spark any discussion about taxation rather than philanthropy among those people rich enough to have those kind of concerns?
Well, not really, I'm afraid. I mean, the T word is really the forbidden word in places like Davos. You can talk about anything, about education, about feminism, about climate change, as long as you don't talk about higher taxes on the rich. But I said to myself, I just can't go on and talk about these issues when no one talks about the elephant in the room, which is, we gotta be talking about taxes, taxes, taxes.
Free marketeers would argue that high taxes curtail the free market and therefore stifle economic growth. What would you say to that?
So what I was advocating in Davos was simply lower taxes, for the lower classes and the middle classes, for people who actually do the real valuable work, and higher taxes on the rich. This is what we had in the past, and in those times we had much higher rates of economic growth and much more technological innovation.
To support, say, 70% taxation, I'd have to believe that my government would spend that money efficiently. Why would I trust that my government would spend that money efficiently, given the revelations that we've heard over the decades about corruption and waste in many governments around the world?
What I think we should do is to zoom out and to look at the broader research. There's been recent interesting evidence from two Dutch economists that looked at a poll that was done among 27,000 employees in more than 30 countries. And they asked people a very simple question. The question was, do you think your job is valuable or not? Turns out that actually 25% of all employees say, well, my job doesn't contribute anything really at all. And that number is 4 times as high in the private sector as in the public sector. So there are a huge amount of really valuable jobs in the public sector. Think about firefighters, think about police officers, think about care workers, nurses, doctors, you name it. A huge amount of things that we, really, really need. Education, health is often, being done by people on the government payroll. So I think that we need to move towards a different narrative about government and work and where the real wealth creators.
Let me put the devil's advocate argument to you. If one believes in liberal democracy, philanthropy is a better ideal than taxation because then it's my choice if I want to give my money away.
So in places like Davos, philanthropy is being used as a way to distract people from simply immoral things that are going on at the same time. So what we have here are billionaires with totally corrupt business models. They're not paying their workers a living wage, they're avoiding their taxes, they're polluting the environment, and then to distract from all that, they say, oh, I got a nice plan for some education for girls in Uganda or whatever. Now, I'm not against philanthropy. I mean, by all means, come up with all those wonderful plans, but pay your taxes first. With taxes, we buy civilization, and it's simply, a prerequisite for a well-governed society.
Let me put another argument to you that's often made against higher taxation, that higher taxation is a disincentive against ingenuity and hard work.
Well, it certainly is if we put higher taxes on the lower classes and the middle classes, on labour. But what I'm advocating is higher taxes mainly on wealth, on people who are just sitting back, relaxing, who have inherited much of that wealth, or who have a business model that is pretty much about rent-seeking. Think about the financial sector. We've got a huge amount of evidence that actually a big part of the financial sector is not being productive at all. So if you have higher taxes on those people, it's a disincentives for those kind of activities, and they may actually start doing something that is useful.
Rutger Bregman, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.